talking before I introduce you and everything. We were just talking about your book. I like the fact, John, closing the deal and building your wealth. I like the fact that you use the word build. Why did you use that word?
Well, because it doesn't happen overnight. It's rare for anything to really happen overnight. It takes time.
Mm-hmm.
So, it may start with that first purchase, and as we slowly build that and snowball that in second, third, or fourth purchase, if that's what the person's willing to do. Sometimes you'll have a scenario where they're building that first purchase, if that's what the person's willing to do.
Sorry, John. Good.
Yeah, you got that?
Mm-hmm. Sorry about that.
Okay, so that they're buying that first home, not with the intent to build wealth, but real estate you're in. All of a sudden, you wake up one day and you had a $200,000 home in, let's say, the New York area, now worth $1 million. That's wealth, right?
Wow.
The equity that you have with that. So,
wow.
So the book was designed first and foremost for that first-time home buyer, and just to work them out, not so much to provide answers, but more so to get them to know to ask the right questions. Because a book can't really solve your problem on the fly, what's happening on a daily basis. You can't say, well, my book says this, I should do this. People are going to look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah.
But if you know to ask the right questions, then you'll understand the answers as they come at you. And then the second part then goes into when you have this property and now you want to build your wealth slowly but surely. One of the ways to do that is to defer taxes, not to avoid them, but to defer them. And to the 1031 exchange. And then we have a little bonus section there with regard to the mortgage refinancing. And, the essence is basically the same. So the refinancing aspect is a similar process when you already own, or if it's even your first time and you're about to buy. There's very minor differences because at the end of the day, those differences are on the lender side and not so much on the buyer or the refinancer side.
Gotcha.
Right? The only difference is maybe it's a little less stressful because you're not wondering if you're going to get approved on a loan to buy that house because you're
nice. John Kokolakis, Roundup family. Greetings, class. Greetings. This is Chris Haskins with the realestateroundup.com. Thank you for hanging out with us today. My mission and my ministry is to raise your financial literacy through real estate investing and entrepreneurship. Today, I've got a guest with me that is both actually an entrepreneur, real estate investor, and a licensed attorney, John Kokolakis. How you doing, my friend? Did I say that right?
You said it perfectly, Chris. How you doing? Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Yes, I'm so honored to be with you. Thank you for coming on as my Roundup family gets logged on today. On my Monday Masters, typically we talk about the fence, the right side. I'm sorry, typically we talk about the left side, which is unconventional for my audience, but John wants to, and we actually talked about this. We talked about this for several months, actually, John, didn't we? Before we came up with it?
A few times, yeah. It was a matter of some timing.
Yeah, so we have been putting this together for several months now, and John, we met at a convention. You really, really opened my mind. Our first conversation, John, the data that you gave me literally helped me to raise my income, John. Did I ever tell you that?
You didn't tell me the end result. Thank you for taking it. I have a tendency sometimes to give advice even when it's not requested. So it wasn't solicited, but I'm glad it worked out for you.
John, you are like a walking, just that little stuff. You opened my eyes to business and per se, and just having different avenues. I want to thank you for that.
My pleasure, man.
Today, John, to give us a background, how we got here. Give me a 40,000-foot view of John, your background, and how we got to be an attorney in New York.
Okay, so as far as being an attorney, I'm one of the lucky ones per se, or unlucky, depending which way you look at it, in that I knew I wanted to be an attorney since I was 5 years old, right? And this is what I'm told when I was a kid. All I said is, I want to be a lawyer. The reason why that was easy and that I had a goal, and I understood that no matter what came at me at life, it was this many years of high school, this many years of college, then off to law school. So even when I had life hitting me hard at times, no matter what I was doing, I would sit there. I remember one moment when I'm in college and I just couldn't take it anymore. And I just took out my fingers and I'm like, okay, this. And once I understood, okay, just 4 more years, boom, I put my head down and I was able to move forward. So that was a blessing, right? Any time in life when you have a goal and you have a purpose, it makes it easier to fight through what you want to do, right? So on that road, however, to becoming an attorney, I did a few different things. I worked in the Senate up in Albany.
Uh-oh. We have lost Kokolakis.
Attorney. You got me back there?
Darn, John, we lost you. Last thing I heard was Senate.
Okay, so I worked for the Senate for a little bit, and then after that, I worked in New York City as a management auditor. And this was all on my road, on my journey to becoming an attorney. And you got me, Chris? We're still there?
Yeah, we're good. I'm listening.
All right, cool. So that's basically it. Then I became an attorney. I passed the bar, and I first got into personal injury because that's
crazy.
Yeah, through some people that I had met, and I went into that field for a while.
You're in the court litigating, throwing words around?
I was in court litigating. I did a lot of litigation starting out, and then I went into commercial litigation. So many of the real estate contracts and the real estate deals that we talk about, when they go bad, I've battled those in court.
Wow.
It gives me an advantage, in my opinion, over a straight transactional attorney, because not only am I having the experience from drafting the contracts, but how when they battle them out, how the case law will interpret that laws, and generally how judges like to treat the contract.
Wow.
So there's no disconnect. And what I mean by that is many times if a contract goes bad, immediately the guy says, okay, you got to go get yourself another attorney. I don't handle that. And that disconnect is not only can it be costly, but it takes some time to get the other attorney up to speed. Right? Whereas here, it's quick. If I need to, I can immediately hustle. Next day, I'm in court doing what I have to do.
So just so I understand the framework of your point of view, typical attorneys that are doing real estate transactions are not going into the courtroom. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. A straight transactional attorney will not go into the courtroom. They can if they like. There's nothing that stops them, but usually they're going to niche down and just do what, just handle the contract aspect of it.
Yeah.
So we have some attorneys who just litigate. We have some attorneys who only do transactional work. And then we have some who like to do both.
Yeah. Okay? I love it. That's why I love talking to you. Let's get into this roundup. Today, we're talking about first-time home buyer pitfalls. And John has his book below, Closing the Deal and Building Your Wealth. If you stay to the end with us, we'll give you the link in the video description. You can download John's book for the next 2 days. John, thank you for that for free.
My pleasure.
So go ahead, John. So we were talking the characters, the players. Let's get started, John. The people that want to buy their first property, go ahead, hit them, John.
All right. So usually when we're looking to buy the first property, I like to start with the newlywed couple. Usually they just get married. They're looking out to start their life together, right? And they really don't know much about real estate, but they know they want to have that home. They want to start a family. They want to have kids, whatever the case may be. But they don't know where to start, right? So what I usually recommend in that situation is search the market. If you know you're going to buy a place now or in a year or 2 years or 3 years from now, start looking from now, right? And the analogy I like to make is you're not buying a cup of coffee, right? This is a major investment. You are going to get intertwined with other players who we'll touch upon in a moment. And usually the first player you'll touch upon is the real estate agent, right? And so you'll deal with a real estate agent or real estate broker, and they're going to walk you around the area and show you properties. The problem, however, is when they're showing you the properties, they're going to want to get from you what you want. And it's hard for them to explain to you, what's a good neighborhood, what's a bad neighborhood, if you don't have the criteria to give them to help them help you. So you need to first think about, where do you want to live? Why do you want to live there? For example, many times they're like, well, we're going to have children one day and we want to be in a good school district. So that may be on the top of your list as far as priorities. Or it may be, I want to be near where I work. Or it may be, I want to be near where my husband or my wife works or something along those lines. Or I want to be near my parents, whatever the case is. So you got to somehow get yourself into a particular area. But then when you're in that area, if you don't see the houses around it, you got to then make sure it matches your budget. Because you might say, wow, this is exactly where I want to live. You want to spend $400,000 and you realize that area it's $800,000. You have yourself a problem. And then you have to figure out at that point, okay, where do I compromise? Do I leave the area a little bit for reason A, reason B? Maybe I move out a little further out to the suburbs, understanding what the differences are. But it's not just as far as the overall price. And this is where sometimes people get stuck on.
Golly, I keep losing you, John. Roundup, hang with me. Let's see if we get him back over. We got him stuck.
Okay.
We're back. You're back. Okay. This is a lot of times where people get stuck, not the overall. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what happens is people need to consider the purchase price, but not so much the purchase price. And say, for example, $1 million.
Okay.
And they get stuck on that big number. And they'll say it's too expensive or not too expensive, whatever the case may be. But in reality, it's not costing them the million. And I'm not going to do the math to say how it's actually going to cost more in the future, but I want to look at the initial walking in the door. So generally, a first-time home buyer might be able to get away with 3 to 5% or even 0 if an FHA loan, or if it's a conventional loan, you're looking at 10, 15, 20%, depending on the market. So in reality, if it's $1 million home, it's not going to cost you $1 million to get into the door. It may cost you just $100,000 or $200,000. And so that is key. And the reason why that's key is because that in conjunction with, let's say, property taxes. So for example, in our area, many times people will say, well, I can't afford the houses in your area, so I'm going to go out to Long Island, which is a suburb a little further out, because over there the houses are half the price.
Gotcha.
And I'm like, okay, wonderful. But the property taxes on that house are going to be, let's say, $30,000 a year, for example, whereas the property taxes in our area might be $5,000 to $10,000 a year. So that's something that you need to consider, because a mortgage can get paid down, but your property taxes don't get paid down.
Mm-mm.
If anything, they're going to go up year after year after year.
Mine do.
Don't be fooled by the immediate numbers. So this is something that many times a real estate agent won't explore. And so going back to your original question as to the players. So you have a buyer of the property, but then you're going to have a seller of the property. And so the seller generally will have their real estate agent who's helping them sell the property. And the buyer usually is going to have their agent who's going to help them locate a property. Sometimes it may be the same agent. Sometimes it won't. Now, usually after there's a deal to be made, then they bring in the attorney. Like, okay, let's draft contracts, go get the attorney. And this is where I have a bit of an issue. I'm like, if you're going to use an attorney anyway, because in the state of New York, you have to have an attorney. So if you're going to have an attorney anyway, bring that attorney at the beginning of the relationship. Bring the attorney even before you meet with the real estate agent. Because if you think about it, you're going to sign some documents with the real estate agent, and you did not have someone looking out for your best interest to even explain to you what you're signing. So sometimes you've almost kind of, kicked the lawyer in
backwards
a little bit to not allow you to give you that next level of help, since you're going to use them anyway. So now we have, let's say, the attorneys who come on board. And before that, we may usually have a binder. So a binder is where the buyer is going to make an offer to sell. The real estate agent usually will draft up that binder with the basic terms of the agreement. And the buyer will sell it. The buyer will sign it. The seller will sign it as well. And I always recommend to my clients when signing it to write on there, if I'm not involved and I'm not there to be able to review it, to sign that it's subject to their attorney's review.
I like that. On the contract, John?
Right on the binder, right by their signature.
Holy cow.
Anywhere else.
I'm going to write that one down. I've never even seen that one before.
Yeah, it gives you an out just in case. It helps. Okay? So then generally now, the buyer is going to have their attorney. The seller is going to have their attorney. And of course, they're each going to have their respective real estate agents or brokers who are involved in the deal.
That's a contingency that we could probably possibly. I never even thought about using that for a contingency.
Yes.
Go.
Right. Now, some states are a little different in that you're allowed to put some of those type of contingencies early on in the contract.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I believe New Jersey has a 3-day review period for an attorney to review it.
Mhm.
New York doesn't have that, right?
Okay.
Every state's going to be a little different.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, of course, if you're going to Florida or out in California, you don't even need attorneys to be involved, right? And for much
Virginia either.
process.
But you can still add that in on the other provisions if you wanted to, right?
Of course you can. Why not?
Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay.
Go.
It's just a matter of if they're going to allow you or they're going to give you some pushback, right? But if someone's giving you some pushback on that, then you got to wonder why.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes another lesson unrelated to what we're discussing here is you got to be okay to walk away from the deal, right? If something just smells a little off, don't fall in love with it. It's hard because we get emotionally involved. Sometimes we're involved because the numbers are just right. Sometimes we're emotionally involved because it's so pretty, right? It's just just the right color, or your time invested. And once your time invested, you don't. Yeah. You have a question?
No, I'm trying to having a little trouble. You said your time invested. What do you mean by that, John?
Correct. So, for example, when you first see a property, Chris, it's probably very easy at that moment to walk away from the deal like this.
Mm-hmm.
But if all of a sudden you're negotiating that deal for 2 weeks and you're very close, and now they throw something at you that ordinarily at the beginning of the deal you would have walked away, now you may not walk away so quick because you invested time, energy, maybe some money. Now emotionally you're involved. And now you might swallow that pill that you may not have ordinarily swallowed.
Gotcha.
So that's something to take into consideration. And that's more a strategic aspect to see when you want to introduce information or add to that fact pattern, so to speak.
Gotcha.
Okay? Then we're going to have the lawyers. The lawyers are going to battle out. They're going to negotiate that contract.
Yep.
Okay. And then when they have a meeting of the minds, they're going to sign the contract. The buyer's going to send the contract over to the seller, and they're going to do so with a down payment. Right? And that down payment, this is key, is you want to make sure it's going to get deposited in the seller's attorney's escrow account.
Okay. We're going to get to escrow.
You don't want those funds to be given directly to the seller. Now, when you're doing non-traditional deals, it may be a little different. But now we're talking straight traditional deal where we're trying to get the most protection for a buyer client who.
For the most protection for the buyer client. Darn it. Sorry about that. Roundup. If you're just joining us, I'm with John Kokolakis. He's a real estate attorney in New York. He's frozen. John, you there?
I am. Am I back?
God, yeah. For some reason it keeps freezing, but we're going to push through it.
Sorry about that.
It is happening, John, if you're just joining us, I needed a second too. If you're just joining us, Roundup'ers, we're hanging out with John Kokolakis. His book is in the video description below. He's training us today on being a first-time home buyer. The man has so many nuggets to drop to prevent you from making serious mistakes and losing money and not being overcharged for services. John, you were saying attorneys are going to battle it out, go back and forth.
Yeah, so they're going to
Escrow.
Yeah, they're going to negotiate that contract. Buyer's going to send the final approved version to the seller for signature, in addition to a down payment check, and that check is going to be held in escrow.
All right, explain for my Roundup'ers that may not have any idea what escrow means, which I didn't know years ago myself.
Okay, so an escrow account is a special account that attorneys hold where the money gets deposited into that account. Now, the money does not belong to the attorney. The money does not yet belong to the seller, but it's held there as a security, as good faith for the seller to say, okay, buyer, I know you got the money. Because think about it this way. The buyer is going to say, I don't want to send you the money. You take it and run. And the seller's going to say, but how do I know you even have the money? So we need some good faith deposit. But we need to make sure it's protected so nobody runs. And there's language in the contract that the attorneys negotiated that address that money that's being held in escrow. And escrow is very, very serious. If an attorney took that money and ran, they're going to lose their license. right?
I love it.
And so
Yeah.
many times people think, oh, my lawyer did this or my lawyer did that. And here's the question you have to ask yourself. Do you really think for 20, 30, 40, 50, $100,000, the attorney is going to risk their license and their livelihood? The odds are no.
Probably not. Yeah.
Well, of course, there's always exception to every rule, but generally speaking, the odds are no. Okay. Here in New York, there actually also is a victims fund that's built in through the bar. So in these type of scenarios, there is also recourse where there's the person who was injured by the theft of this money, for example, if that ever happened, can go forward to get some recourse for that.
I've only heard a few people actually filing bankruptcy since I've been doing this since 2004, but it was malicious. It was purposely taken. You know, it wasn't like something happened.
If you were to file bankruptcy and the money's in escrow, that money, remember that my filing of a bankruptcy would not affect these funds. They're not my funds. They're not my assets. Right?
Yeah.
To go to the next level, especially how it is set up in New York, even the bank cannot pull bank fees.
Wow.
Because it's not our money.
Gotcha.
And so even if they do, they have to immediately put it back. And it's a whole system that's set up with the individual state and the bank in that state.
So that money's protected.
It is protected. Yeah.
Roundup family, I got to cut you off real quick. Make sure you get your questions in the chat box for John. Please get your questions in. This meeting today, this Monday Masters is on my dime, so you can get your questions answered by a licensed attorney. John, I know we're going so many places. Let me ask you, how do you help clients, or how do we help my audience where to live and why? I think I was remembering my first purchase. It could be so overwhelming, John. I mean, how the hell do we narrow it down?
Yeah, it comes to a personal preference, right? There's no straight and easy answer, but it first starts out to what's important to them.
What's important?
One person may put an emphasis on a good school district.
Yeah, everybody has different things. Give us some ideas, John.
Another person may want something close to where they live. Another one may want something close to where their elderly parents are. So in case something happens to the parents, they're close and they're nearby. Or they want those parents closer when they have kids, they can drop their kids off to the parent, right? So those are many aspects. Or they could say, I don't care where I live, but I think this area is going to go up in value. And so if I'm going to live somewhere, let me go here and let me gamble on that.
Gotcha.
So there's many different reasons, but it's not so simple. I'll give you a story where years ago, I was looking to buy for myself, and I was actually looking in the Westchester area of New York, and I did not know the area at all. And even when I was asking real estate agents, they couldn't clearly answer my questions. So all I could do was spend my weekends seeing dozens and dozens and dozens of properties till I get a basic idea of what was out there. Then I knew to ask the right specific question to the agent who can then help me.
Gotcha.
Right? It was a horrible experience and that it took a lot of time, but I'm glad I did it because I walked away with knowledge.
Well, every house buying, to me, I mean, every one of them I've ever done takes time. It's just going to take time.
Yeah. Sometimes you get a little lucky, right? If we detach first from the purpose that we're dealing with today, and we're talking strictly as an investor, I think it's a much easier process. Because as an investor, I'm just looking at numbers. I take out the calculator. You know, sometimes people look at me when they're like, oh, don't you want to see the place? I go, no. I look at the numbers, I go, who cares what the place looks like, right? But when you're dealing with a newlywed couple, for example, of course they care how the place looks, right? So we're talking to, it's a whole different breed, it's a different situation. So now let's go back to the contract.
Gotcha.
So the contract's signed, it's done, and the seller at that point really just has to wait for a little bit. There's not much more they can do. The buyer, on the other hand, has a few concerns.
Okay.
Right? One of the things we didn't address, which may happen parallel to the signing of the contract, is inspecting the property. Right? Getting an engineer or getting a home inspector and make sure it is what they believe it to be, and to really help to see if there's any hidden issues that may be uncovered, right? Now, it's difficult to expect the home inspector to really see any potential problem, because a lot of times there can be problems that are hidden because there's sheetrock and there's walls up, everything's behind the walls, so it's hard. So you really want to get someone who is good enough, who can spot certain issues. And for example, you'll be able to see if there was an old leak in the ceiling. So if there was, and even though it may be dried out, or forget the ceiling, go look in the closet and look in the closet ceiling to see if there's anything there that may be hidden. So that's an example. Or to be able to go into the basement and check the beams and see if you're trained enough to see if there's any sign of any termites, right? You're not going to see the actual termite, but by looking at the condition of the wood, you may be able to pick up on that. So that's a reason why you would want an experienced home inspector or engineer, right? Because it's not just about the structural issues. It's not just about the big thing of whether there's a crack in the foundation. It's the little things as well. Okay? Let's assume the property is inspected. Everyone is happy. Immediately after that, the buyer has to go get their financing, right? And so the buyer is going to go through the whole financing process. And during that process, there's a question that comes up. And the question that comes up is, should the buyer also run a title search, an abstract search? And what that is it's something that's guided by the attorney for the buyer here in New York to make sure there's no judgment and lien, to make sure that the person selling actually owns the house they're selling. So we're going to look at chain of title to make sure that there's no surprises. So usually in my contracts, I like to time it out in stages. I don't like to order title right away because I don't know if I have a commitment yet on my mortgage.
For the financing, you mean?
Excuse me?
You're saying you're not sure?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Because if the financing doesn't come through and I already started the next level, I'm spending my client's money prematurely.
I see.
So I want to time it. And I think this is more important with a novice buyer, a first-time buyer. With a seasoned buyer, it doesn't make a big deal. A few $100s here and there, they don't care. They just want closing fast as possible.
Yeah.
But for time's not so important with a person buying their first home. They're more nervous of having it done the right way, and they're not wrong. Because in the scheme of things, 1 week or 2 weeks is meaningless, right? Yeah. But buying the wrong property is a lifetime of problems, right? Wow. So once you get the financing in place, so you get, let's say, this commitment, the bank says, yes, we're committed, and we're going to give you a loan. At that point, we're going to go and we're going to run to make sure there's no judgment and liens, make sure it's clear, it's fine. We got clearance both on the bank side to close the loan, and we have clearance on the seller side, there's no issues, and the buyer's attorney is pleased as well. When all the ducks are in a row or in a circle, then at that point in time, it's time to schedule a closing. And closing is basically, in simple terms, it's where the cash gets handed over and the keys are handed over, and we have ourselves a closed transaction.
Nice.
But in order to have that, we're going to have the real estate agents, we want their schedules, the buyer's attorney schedule, the seller's attorney, the title company is going to have a title closure who's going to come as well, and the bank's going to have their attorney. So we have to make sure that all these people are able to be at the same place at the same time. So
okay.
We make that as well. Okay?
Nice.
Now, what people don't realize is the buyer is actually having 2 closings that day. They're actually closing the loan and they're closing on the property.
Okay.
Because if the loan doesn't close, they do not have the money to buy the property. Whereas the seller is just doing 1 closing in which they're selling the property.
Loan and house.
Correct.
I didn't think about it like that. 2 transactions.
That's it. That's what the buyer has to do. Right? And one of the things that we touched upon earlier about contingencies, another contingency that's very, very important to have, that a contract should have, especially for a first-time home buyer, is a mortgage contingency. In other words, remember that money we discussed earlier that we put in escrow, the down payment funds?
Yep.
We want to make sure that if we, the buyer, did what we needed to do, but the bank was not willing to give us the money and we could not find a lending institution to give us the funds that we're able to back out of the deal and get our escrow down payment money back. That's very, very important. Okay.
Mortgage contingency.
Correct. Which is something a little different than when we refer to when we talk about all cash deals.
Yeah.
Encounter in a commercial property.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, and this is something I find that I have to explain to a lot of my clients who are buying investment properties, but they're first-time investment property buyers, right? And where they think that an all-cash deal means no lending institution. And that's not true. Because on an all-cash, you can still go to a bank to get a loan, but what it really means is that there's no contingency.
Contingencies.
So if you can't get a loan, you got yourself a problem, and you may not be able to get your money back, right? And the reason I say may not, because sometimes there's room for negotiation.
What type of escrow are we talking about in New York, John? Down here, a typical, we call it earnest money. Down here is $500 to $1,000 typically. What are you looking at up there?
Typically, we're looking at 10% of the purchase price.
Wow. And your buyer, wow.
Yeah. So if you're talking $1 million property, it's $100,000
in escrow. Wow.
Yeah, that money's getting held.
Mm-hmm.
Zero interest usually.
Something. Okay.
And remember, that interest, what will happen is that accumulates, it will go towards that victim fund in New York that we discussed earlier. And that's how they build up to protect these victims in other scenarios where there may be issues that happen.
Nice. This is good stuff, Roundup'ers. We'll keep it going. John, if you're just joining us, I'm hanging out with John Kokolakis today. We're talking about information to become an aware first-time home buyer. John is an attorney in New York. You can download his book right in the video description below, free of charge for the next 2 days. Thank you, John, for that. And get your Q&A in. Get any questions that you guys have. Please put it in the chat over there. Get them answered by a real estate attorney today. So we got that. We got escrow, John, back out, disputes. So many places we could go. So we bought the house, John. The buyers bought the property. Sellers happy. They walked away, moved in. You have a section here about what if you have any problems app. Do we want to touch that today, or we want to do that another day, John?
We could do that another day, but very quickly, we could touch upon, there's some language. There's a law in New York that came down the pike, I believe 2001, 2002, is kind of a non-disclosure. And so what that generally means is that the seller has an option. And their option is they can either give a $500 credit to the buyer, or they can answer tons of questions with regard to the condition of the property. And here in the metropolitan area, usually we're going to advise that it is give the $500 credit, right? And the premise is that we don't want to give all these answers, not that we're hiding anything, because if a seller is concealing anything, then this law wouldn't protect them, right? But by doing this credit, it kind of allows everyone to play on a level playing field and walk away feeling a little more comfortable.
Gotcha.
So a question that comes up frequently is, well, there's a problem with the house, and I know we had this disclosure that was in place. Can I sue because of this condition to the property after the fact? And it depends, right? Typical attorney answer, it depends.
Gotcha.
It really depends on the fact pattern. There are aspects where we're going to turn around and think about buyer beware, caveat emptor. And so this is where we have to be a little careful. But if, and this is clear with some case law, that if you had a seller that truly had, let's say, some foundation damage that they were aware of, and they purposely hid it, then yeah, they have probably a solid case in court. But you never want to go there. You never want to be in that scenario, because again, to hire attorneys on each side of the fence and to litigate is costly. So you want to make sure you did everything the right way at the beginning and truly inspect the property to make sure you know what you're buying. Okay, yeah. That doesn't mean you'll catch everything. It's impossible to catch anything, but it really increases the odds of you getting a solid property.
So regarding these inspections, John, do you get involved with that, being an attorney at all with your clients?
Generally speaking, attorneys do not get involved with the inspection side. What I do, however, when I'm dealing with the first-time home buyer, and of course any of my clients who want me to, but more so with the first-time home buyer, is following the inspection report. And when they received it, I first review it, and then I like to review it with them.
Yeah, because a lot of information I remember my first one, I'm like, what the hell is all this?
Correct. And what happens is there may be scenarios where they overreact over something that's no big deal. But then there's other things that might be serious and they overlook it. So I like to walk them through it one step at a time by each section. And so if, for example, we're dealing with, oh, I noticed there was a little paint, where the paint was, or chipping paint. I'm like, come on, $30, you're going to fix that problem. No big deal. Don't worry. But if it's a little crack in the foundation in the basement, that's something we want to look into, right? Gotcha. Along those lines, I always tell them, try to inspect the property during or after a rainfall, because we want to really see if there's any water damage issues or water coming in. Also, you want to see the rain when it's falling, what direction it's taking, and that helps as well. So yes, we do walk step by step with regard to the report. Sometimes it's a serious issue where we want to figure out if we have an out in our contract to get us out of the deal or renegotiate the purchase price.
That's where I was going next.
So
that's where I was going next, John. Go ahead with that. Let's talk about that. Are you involved with that too, John?
Yes.
Wow.
So we get involved as far as the negotiation aspect. Now, the way I like to break up a contract is the business terms and the legal terms. With regard to the business terms, that's the purchase price, right? And even though generally speaking, that side of it is more so the client's decision. It's their business decision to see if they want to spend a certain amount of money. But it's my experience that comes to the table to let them know, is this a crazy amount or not a crazy amount? Gotcha. And is this above fair market or below fair market? At the end of the day, the decision is still theirs. And so, for example, you may have a property and I can say to them, listen, I think you might be overpaying this property by about 20 grand. And they're like, oh, should we break the deal? I'm like, no, I never said that. Do you really want this property, right? Is it worth the extra 20 grand for you? If the answer is yes, then of course you buy the property, right? Yeah. But my job is just open your eyes to let you be aware of it. An agent may or may not be as candid. And there's some excellent real estate agents that we work with, but they have a certain bit of a bias.
Let's go there, John. Go there.
Yeah. And so with regard to their bias, it's very simple. They have a duty, they have a job, and their job is to find their client that perfect property, right? When they're dealing with the buyer, and their job is to find, on behalf of a seller, that perfect person to purchase the property. That's really it.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the bank, for example, they have one job: to lend the money, right? And they only care about giving the money, protecting the money, to make sure they can get their interest, because they're in the business of lending money to make money. That's their job.
Gotcha.
So by definition, they don't care about the borrower. And they really shouldn't. It's not their job. I don't mean to sound cold, but think about it. Now, the attorney, however, their very essence, their job is to protect their client. The seller's job is fiduciary duty to zealously represent the interests of his client, and the buyer's attorney, the same. So we sometimes overlap. It's not so much the actual contract. It's not so much the drafting of the documents. So for example, we'll have a standard contract, but my standard contract will always change a little bit based on the needs of my client, based on the situation at hand, which is why we always start our meetings with a strategy session. I really want to understand from my client, especially the first-time home buyer, what do they want? Why do they want it? Do they plan on holding this house for 5 years, 100 years, 3 years, 1 year?
Wow.
Are they looking to flip it or not?
So much stuff.
And so I need to know this at the beginning so I can understand what type of advice to give them.
Wow.
So going back to, let's say, the overpayment of $20,000. If they look at to buy the house, hold it for a year, and then sell it, they have to walk away from the deal. They're going to be underwater.
Yeah.
But if they look at to buy it, this is the perfect place where they want to raise their family. In the scheme of things, $20,000 is meaningless. They're putting 10% down, if you think about it. So it's only costing them an extra $2,000 up front. Eat it, move on, and enjoy life.
Wow. So every buyer's, Wow, John, it sounds like you really have to know that. Well, I mean, I think when people ask me about they want blanket real estate investing advice, and I'm just like, I have never thought there was a cookie cutter advice that I could give them. It sounds like it's the same for first time home buyers too.
Correct. So what I will say on that is the principles are always the same. Whether we're investing or investors, or we're looking at the first time home buyer, the principles run a line, they're identical.
Gotcha.
It's based on the facts that come to us, which way we need to pivot.
Gotcha.
Right? So as you know, even on an investment property, you got to have certain elements. And some elements to you may be more important than the elements to someone else.
Yeah.
And once you've determined what's important to you, then you realize if that's going to matter or not. So if price is the number one factor, then it's kind of easy. If it doesn't match your budget, you walk away. But if there's other factors, then I'm not going to emphasize the price so much.
Gotcha. John, we didn't tell us I want to talk about inspectors that know the real estate agent. If you could maybe I want to know your opinion on that. I don't backdoor.
Now you're trying to get me in some hot water.
Not yet. Don't answer yet. Well, we talked about the agent being biased. How does that come about? And just shed some light on that. We didn't really cover that. What do you mean by being biased?
Okay. The reason why an agent may be biased is because their interest is to connect a buyer and a seller and to get the deal closed. They only get paid if the deal closes. Okay. Now, they make a good amount of money, but it's still only if the deal closes. On a deal by deal basis, an attorney makes less money, generally speaking.
Oh, yeah.
But we get paid whether that deal closes or not. So we have a different interest, right? For the most part, because there are certain times when I'm not going to get paid if a deal breaks, depending on whether I did a lot of work or not on the deal. But generally speaking. But with regard to bias, it's human nature, right, to not bite the hand that feeds you. So, for example, and I think this is where you were heading with this, if an agent is referring a home inspector to you, is it possible that that home inspector may or may not emphasize certain issues on the property because they don't want to break a deal?
And we're presuming that most agents and inspectors are going to do the right thing. Let's preface this by saying that.
Correct. And I was going to get to that as well, because at the end of the day, they are professionals.
Yeah.
Right. I deal with multiple agents and I deal with multiple inspectors rather. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'll get a client and they say, yeah, I found this inspector that the real estate agent referred to me. And I ask them, did you meet them? Are you happy with them? They say yes. And I'm like, good, go do what you got to do. Let's see the report. Right. So even though we say there's this bias, it doesn't mean that's the norm, right? And by the way, the bias can work the same way, even with attorneys and real estate agents. It's whoever's going to be feeding you. It's one of those things. But attorneys have certain ethics built in that others don't. And by built in, we have a bar that's on top of us to make sure that we're avoiding any type of these conflicts, right? I told you you're going to get me in trouble.
Yeah, okay. I won't push you too hard. You being an attorney, you just got to watch what you're saying. I understand. So we'll hold tight. We'll just say that they could be, but generally they're not. No.
And honestly, it's very rare that I could say I've encountered that over the years. And I'm doing this over 20 years, right? But every so often, something just smells. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, if my intuition, so to speak, which gets stronger and stronger as I practice longer and longer, I may say, hey, let's double check something, right?
Should the buyer be aware? Because it's not even that bad if the buyer is buying a house from I've seen deals where the agent renovated the house and now they're selling it, where they're the ones that's selling the house to the buyer. Is that a bad thing, or can that turn out to be a good situation as well? Do they
Yeah,
have
it's
go?
definitely not a bad thing in my opinion, but a real estate agent should disclose
That's what I'm going to ask.
if they were the owner or if they're involved in that deal. Once they disclose it, if the buyer likes the property, God bless.
Gotcha. All right, cool. All right. I'll leave you alone on that one. Roundup family, we're hanging out with John Kokolakis. We've been here 45 minutes. If you got some questions, let's go ahead and get them in here for first-time home buyers. A lot of my clients are renters, and I want to get you guys, if you're not going to do, or if you are having some challenges with investing in the unconventional way, John is shedding some light on the conventional way, and I'm not mad at it because there are some good loans out there, and interest rates are still low right now. John, would you say?
Interest rates are very low. Now's a good time to borrow some money. It's cheap.
I'm telling you. My thing is, John, who the hell knows what's going to happen in the election? I mean, I always get nervous during election year, man. I don't know about you, but I'm always like,
we don't know.
no.
I actually have a crystal ball on my desk. I'm looking for it. I don't know where it is now. My little boy made me buy it. And I preface this. I show it to my clients all the time. I go, I have this crystal ball, but it doesn't work, right? So I can guess. I will say, in my opinion, that you should be prepared to be finding some good opportunities soon. So there's hope. I think within the next year, you're going to start seeing it now, but also it depends on what area, right? So in the New York area, even when we've gotten hit at our hardest, it's minor in compared to, let's say, Florida that got hit hard, right? So we don't know. One of the reasons we don't know is because it's hard to figure that out as far as timing. But a second reason is because we don't know what would be the main cause, what would be the trigger. So depending what that trigger is, that final thing that hits, that's the problem. So for example, let's say we start to see rental rates, and you said a lot of your viewers are renters, right? If they start to see that it's easier to rent an apartment, if they start to see that the rent is starting to drop a little bit, which is rare, then they should see, well, if that's happening, the odds are the value of the building, the house, is also going to slowly drop. It doesn't happen overnight, but if you start to see this happen at this level, the odds are this is going to start to drop a little bit, right? Yeah. And then keep your eyes open. What renters can do, if they don't want to get into the whole investing game, certain areas, certain landlords will allow you to say, hey, rent with an option to buy.
Yeah.
Right? So at least this way, you figure out a way to get that rent going towards buying and hold a purchase money mortgage. You can avoid a bank altogether.
Yeah, we do a lot of those, John.
Yeah, it's hard to do in the New York area. Upstate New York, you'll see them more frequently. It's hard to. What you are starting to see here, and this is a sign where the market's weakening, is you're starting to see high-end condominiums in the city starting to do that, where they're allowing people to rent for a year and then take that and put it towards the purchase price.
That's a sign.
Worried, right?
That's a sign of a soft market, correct?
Yep.
Softening market.
Correct.
Yeah, I read that years ago. Well, thanks for hanging out with us, John. This is Daniel. Thank you for your love offering. My boy Daniel always shows up. Thank you, brother Daniel. See, we got some Q&A.
Of course, let's see.
I'm gonna scroll down. I'll read them to you if you don't want to.
All right, sure.
Oh yeah, John. He wants to know, John, are you only licensed to do work in New York?
I'm licensed in New York and Connecticut, but because I've been practicing so long in New York, even in Connecticut, I won't take a deal, right? And the reason and the rationale behind that is, if I don't know exactly what's going on, I don't want to risk my client. So there may be a nuance or a change in the law that I'm not privy to, and I'll make an error. And I can't live with myself for doing that. So even with what I do, is I make sure I'm an expert in that area, which would be above and beyond of just being competent, right? And I use these words because they have certain definitions in the law that can, I guess, categorize if attorneys can do what they're doing. But for example, many years ago, I first started out, I was doing landlord-tenant, evictions and something along those lines. And I was doing it in a housing clinic. So this is even before I was licensed. And one of my first cases, we actually were able to, I was written up in the law journal on it, which was exciting. And especially with young kids starting out, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
So when I started working for my employer at the time, when we were doing the personal injury, he had me starting to do some of the landlord tenant. But after a couple of years, when I stopped it, At the time I was doing it, I knew my stuff.
Gotcha.
Now, when someone comes to me today, I'm going to send them over to another attorney, right? Yeah. I have an idea of how to do it, but maybe there's a change, and I don't want to do that. Now, I might do it for my own stuff because there's a learning curve, and I can figure it out, and I'm only messing up myself, right? If, for instance, something goes wrong. But these are things you got to take into consideration. Again, I said this early on, is it's not a cup of coffee. And what I mean by that is if I go into the coffee shop and I order a cup of coffee and I wanted it black and they added milk, oh, sorry, sir, let me give you another one. It's a quick and easy fix. Mm-hmm. But if you come to me and you want to do a deal and I make an error, I can't say, sorry, sir, here's another $1 million.
Wow. Stakes
are higher. And this is why you need to go to an attorney who knows what they're doing.
Nice. Would you mind? You got your answer there. Let me go to the next question. John, while I'm looking for the next question, I'm curious. You are in the mix of this new landlord-tenant thing in New York. Is that affecting – I see you laughing. Is it affecting you and or is it affecting prices? Well, just tell me, how is that affecting the general market up there?
Well, generally speaking, it's definitely affecting the market. And it's one of the extra nails in that coffin that's going to be coming down, as that slowly get going underground, so to speak. And it's a big hit with regard to renovations. And
what do you mean?
Because what happens is generally when you're dealing with certain properties, and now we're going a little bit beyond my expertise.
Gotcha.
But generally speaking, when we have a landlord who's going to renovate, and let's say they're dealing with a rent control department or a 6-family and above, and they're going to do certain renovations. When they do those renovations, they're allowed to increase the rent by a certain percentage.
Gotcha.
Now they're not able to do that.
Oh, wow.
So now we're getting into a situation where there's no incentive for a landlord to improve the property.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? It's almost like I get images of the Bronx in the 80s, right? Of where you're going to end up slowly getting run down properties because there's no incentive.
Gotcha.
And then we're also in a point where it's getting harder and harder to remove a tenant who's not paying the rent. And it's very one-sided. You turn around, let's say, for example, we go back to our first-time home buyer.
Gotcha. And
they're buying a 2-family home. And it's very wise for them to buy a 2-family home. And the reason is because when you're buying a home, you want that home to be an asset. And my philosophy is that if you buy a 1-family home, it's not an asset, right? And so with that 2-family, it's producing an income. But now I relied on that income in order to be able to pay my mortgage. Then a tenant stops paying. I have to go to court to remove the tenant. And the laws in place say, well, on average, it's going to take you 6 months to a year to remove the tenant. Who pays my mortgage? That's difficult. That's a difficult situation to be in, right? Now, that's not across the board of the U.S., but in New York, it's a problem.
Yeah, I bet. Well, even here, John, obviously, I'm in court quite frequently. And it takes me 30 days just to get on the docket, and I'm sure it's nothing compared to you, I'm sure, but still, we have
30 days is a long time.
Yeah, we all have our, I guess, the landlord-tenant thing going on in front. That's from coast to coast, one could say.
Yeah.
Lisa wants to buy $1 million unit. Okay, in Tennessee. How could she do this with a $40,000 a year salary? I don't know, John. Do you want to go ahead? I don't know.
Well, one, you got to figure out how creative you could be.
Creative.
2, what you should do is go to a lending institution, or 2 or 3, and say to them and ask them this question: based on my salary, how much home can I afford? Or rather, rephrase the question: how much are you willing to lend me up to how much on the price, right? And then once you get that answer, use that as your foundation and then ask, what do I need to do for the difference to get you to approve me on that $1 million unit?
Wow.
Okay. And so at least now you know where you stand, and then get a side hustle, figure it out. You got to make the money, partner up with someone, maybe if it's an investment property, but if you do partner up with someone, now we're dealing with a whole other situation.
Yeah.
I don't care whether it's your mother, your brother, your father's best friend's dog, you get it in writing. If it's a LLC, for example, get an operating agreement, put each other's respective rights in there now that you guys get along. before the quote unquote shit hits the fan. Right?
I'm glad she said multi-unit because I think she could use some of that income to offset the debt. But still, if so,
Maybe. So it depends on which lending institution. Some
Yeah.
banks will allow that, some banks will not. Right?
Gotcha.
It also depends on the state. So, for example, I've seen properties where they'll ignore that number. They'll give you the loan based on different numbers, but because they see that number, they're happy, but they won't make it official, if that makes sense, right? They don't want to say, I'm going to base it on the income coming in,
Mhm.
but the undertone is that they're doing that, right? We're going a little more.
Let's go here.
The banks to do what they do, and I don't want to step on their toes.
Gotcha. That's a good question, Lisa. I tend to kind of I don't know. I see your salary, but for me, I'm gonna we want to do some unconventional stuff. But John, that was a great answer, John. I never thought about that. That's why I love hanging out with people that are smarter than me.
I don't know about that, but I will say this: does she have to start with the $1 million property?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. And so sometimes, remember we said earlier, building wealth. If you can't afford the $1 million, then buy the 300,000, the 400,000, with the goal that you will get yourself into that $1 million property tomorrow.
Yeah, good. Thanks, John. Jay Bai, good advice regarding getting an attorney before the agent. Oh, he liked that one.
Thank you, Jay Bai.
Linda, hey, what could I do if I bought a house subject to and put a lease option tenant into the house, but if the seller files at Chapter 7, or if the bank called the loan due? What I don't know, John, if you want to tackle that one. We were more or less talking about conventional stuff today.
Yeah, you're on the subject too, right? This is where I think you and I earlier we talked about potential issues that can arise.
Yeah.
Right? Because if they did the Chapter 7, you're going to get a trustee who's going to get involved.
Yep. Those dudes are beasts too. They can do, man, they can do anything.
They do whatever they want, right? So ideally, we'd have to look and see that they're.
Golly, Roundup, we just lost John. If you get your questions answered while he's frozen, get your questions in. We're hanging with John Kokolakis. Download his ebook below for the next 2 days for no charge. He put it right there in the video description. Let's see if he comes back on. Golly, I don't know what's happening. Sorry about that, Roundup family. Thanks for joining us today. What is going on? Is that me freezing or is that? That is a good question. I want to hear what he has to say about this also. John, I lost you. Roundupers, get your questions in the Q&A box over there for John Kokolakis. He's going to be answering the questions now. Good gracious. John, you there, buddy? John, you there? Brother John? See if we can get him back on. John is frozen. Good gracious. Roundupers. John, you there?
Yeah.
All right. Generally, file Chapter 7. We just got you back on here. Okay.
So this is a tricky situation and something we touched upon in the past. One of the reasons why in a traditional road, I wouldn't be a fan of a subject to, right?
Yep.
Especially unless you really understand the risks. Because I'll never say to someone, do it or don't do it, right? But I will make sure they understand. And then they're an adult and they can do what they like to do. And I'll be there by their side to protect them as much as I can.
Gotcha.
What I would like to see is I would like to see the attorney for the seller who's going to be handling the bankruptcy to have a meeting with the purchaser on the subject to before they file that bankruptcy petition. They can really sit there and figure out how they're going to handle that. And then on the bankruptcy side, to determine whether they're forced to put it into the petition. Because once it's in there, we have a different aspect. Then we have to worry, we'd have to research the law on the back end with regard to the bankruptcies, and then we see if we have a trustee who's willing to play ball. So there's too many moving parts. I would need to see it in context in front of me to really give you a straight answer.
Gotcha.
But you're right to bring up the question, because technically speaking, without knowing any other information, if the
seller.
Yeah, if we have a seller and the seller's on the mortgage, and on a subject to, they deed it over to the buyer, correct, Chris?
Yes, sir. Deed, we get the deed, you keep the financer.
Okay. So when we have that deed, then the next question to ask, and this is touching upon my bankruptcy knowledge, is how long ago did this happen? So if it happened a year ago, 2 years ago, or 6 years ago. So let's assume this happened 7 years ago. And 7 years has passed, and then they filed the bankruptcy. It's possible, and take this with a grain of salt, generally speaking, you'll be fine, because the loan will get wiped out. The buyer will be able to have that deed, and I'm not going to even think about what that bank is going to do, because now that bank's in a particular problem they have.
Yeah, they either have to go after the house or don't go after the house. So, Linda, welcome to the world of subject to. It carries with it some risk. You have to decide whether you want to deal with the risk or not. John,
yeah, definitely an upside.
Yeah. I won't put you in the hot seat on to give us that one. Vaughn, hey Vaughn, he's heard that $100 is usually the minimum for an earnest money deposit, but some other wholesalers will use $10 and sometimes even $1. Wow. Is the higher earnest money necessary? Go ahead, John.
Okay, so
I would do. Yeah.
Back a little history. Back in the day, it wasn't even $1. It was a peppercorn.
Okay.
Right? Because a peppercorn had value. And so over time, it may have been $1, it may have been $10, or what we would put good consideration.
Consideration.
Right? So it varies from state to state, but generally in New York, we do 10%. And the reason we do the 10% is because we figure that's a good chunk. Now watch, this 10% came into play when houses cost how much? Were they 40,000, 100,000, 200,000? So now, for example, myself as an attorney, if I have $1 million, $2 million, $3 million property, and the other attorney, I'm representing the buyer, and the seller's attorney wants me to put 10% down, I'm going to look at them and say, no, I want to put 5% down or 3% down. And they're like, well, we'll use the 10. I go, you're right, but you're going to tell me that $20,000 isn't a good amount of money? I'm risking $20,000, right? Now that argument may work, it may not. It depends, right? But we will always try. At least I'll do it in my office, okay? Because I don't want to tie up your money if I don't have to. I've minimized your risk, and B, I've allowed you to have that money work for you while this deal is going on, because it might be a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, 6-month deal. We don't know.
Vaughn, John is talking about properties in New York. So, and you're mostly in the metro area, correct, John? Is that what we're referring to?
Correct. I'm in the metro area. Anything throughout all of New York.
Gotcha. Well, we're doing. I mean, down here, I always do minimum $100, sometimes $500. But typically, Vaughn, if you're doing $500 to $1,000 is what I've seen.
And also, you'll get that sometimes where they'll give a $500 or $100 to the real estate agent when they're signing the binder, not to be confused with the deposit on the actual contract of sale. There
you go. Big difference. Big difference. That's going to go to the loan or the purchase price. John, you know I'm thinking about how many earnest monies I had to lose or down payments that I lost. Let me tell you, John, I wrote the check out to the title company, because what I used to do in my younger years, I write the check out to the title company, and don't you know the seller could still deposit the money? They were still depositing my checks.
The question is, did you have an agreement in place that obligated the title company to put into a separate escrow account? If you didn't, then no.
At the time, I was, I'm learning. I'm like, what happened to money getting taken out of my account? So now I do just like you said. Just put it in escrow, and it's over.
Yeah.
Put it in escrow. John, what's the difference between a double closing with a first-time home buyer with attorneys and title companies versus a double closing with an investor where they refuse to do a double closing?
Okay, so I think what you're asking there, Jaman, is with regard to an all-cash deal, because if we're not dealing with an all-cash deal, then there is no difference, right? In other words, the contract is going to govern. So generally speaking, we have the law. And when dealing with a real estate transaction, the law is the contract. And the contract is what the two attorneys and the parties at the beginning agreed to and signed. That becomes their law. So we have to go back to that. So it's what I like to call going back to the basics, and it's that basic contract. When I'm looking at that contract, if that contract permits me to get a loan, well, in that situation, that's it. I have the ability to do that. If they don't allow me to do that, they're breaching the contract, right? But if we're dealing with an all-cash deal, which is what I think you're asking, where
Probably.
it's an all-cash deal, you now, the buyer, want to go get a loan. The seller is saying, no, I don't care. I'm not going to give you time. You probably needed time because the bank is saying they need a little more time to give you the loan. And the seller is saying it wasn't contingent on money. Either you're going to lose your down payment or come to the table and close, right? In that situation, there's nothing you could do. You should have negotiated some additional language early on. This is why when I'm dealing with, and it happens to me all the time, where they come in, they're like, I want to do an all-cash deal, and they're gung-ho, and I have to wake them up as to the possibilities of what can go wrong. And then I'll say, fine, I respect what you want. We could do what you want, but let's at least try to not sneak in, but negotiate some language in there to protect you, right? Yeah. For example, let's say, and this happens, you have language in there to get a loan, to have a bank commit to give you the money, and then at the closing table, the bank says, sorry, I'm not giving you the money.
Happens all the time.
So what happens? So what I try to do is put language in my contract that says, if that were to happen, the seller has to give me an additional 30 days in which to go find another lending institution. Nice. Or they have the right, if they negotiate it, to at least give me my money back, right? No harm, no foul, right? At least, as long as, rather, me, the buyer, I'm not at fault, right? So what would be a thing of fault? If I intentionally did something, like I didn't cooperate with the bank for that to approve, then I'm at fault. But if I lost my job outside of my control, then I'm not at fault. And it's very possible I lose my job right before the deal, and now the bank says, sorry, we can't give you because now you have no source of income.
How many times have deals of mine fallen apart, John? I cannot count. I mean, it happens, dude. A week before, a day before.
Yeah. Well, that's why when you're dealing with the way you're doing it, you're not counting the ones that fall apart. You're counting the ones that close.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Well,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a little different because when we're on the other side of the coin, our metrics are more so we're looking to see the one that closed because we're emotionally attached to that one house. We're not looking at 2, 3, 4, 5 other houses. That one, right? And many times we need to close because, for example, it's August. We're now coming into September. They have a little kid. The little kid has to get written up in the new school. The new school won't accept the kid if they don't have a deed to show they live there. And there's a lot of pressure putting on the lending institution or whoever's holding up the deal because it has to close, right? Which an investor's like, yeah, get my money a week later. That's fine. I get my money. I don't care whether it's September or January.
Yeah,
right?
But the buyer's a lot different. You're right, John.
Yeah.
Very different point of view on that.
And that's why there's more hand-holding when we're dealing with the first-time buyer. Which, by the way, also when we're dealing with the first-time home investor as well, because they're not yet seasoned in the investing side. So just like you said yourself, you're going to make some rookie mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
We're all going to do that, right? I've made plenty of mistakes myself, and it's no judgment. As we grow, as we know, now we know, it's if we don't learn from our mistakes, that's when we're fools. As long as we're learning from our mistakes, it's all good.
Nice. Bounce City. Hey, Bounce City. I'm presuming you have those bouncy houses. I heard they're pretty good businesses. Is it possible to put a low cash offer on a house with hard money to get a good deal and then pay it back with a pre-approved FHA loan? That's a good question.
Okay, now you're on the bank side for two parts. One, is it possible to buy a low cash offer on a house with hard money? Well, that part's yes, easy, right? And you want to make sure there's no prepayment penalty on there, or there is because your intent is to pay them back quick. And if you don't negotiate that prepayment penalty, you're going to have a different surprise, right?
Real quick, John, before we get to the second part, what is a prepayment penalty for some of my Roundup'ers that don't know?
Okay, so generally, and let's touch this with, you don't see this on a conventional loan with a typical home buyer, right? But with an investor, you'll see it often. And generally speaking, the bank is lending you the money, and when they're lending you the money, they've done their calculations. and they've done their calculations that they're lending you this money and taking this risk because they anticipate to get a certain amount of money back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you do is you come to the table and they think it's going to be a 10-year loan. You come to the table and say, you know what, I'm only going to pay you off in 1 year. You've messed up their numbers. They're like, now I went through all this thinking I'm going to make this much profit. I'm not going to make this profit. So now I have to penalize you, right?
Gotcha.
Because I need to make the difference of that money. So a prepayment penalty, to answer directly, is a penalty that I need to pay if I pay you back in advance. In other words, before the money is actually due.
Gotcha.
Make sense?
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thanks for that one. So to finish that one, can they do it, FHA? I presume they've already been pre-approved. It looks like they want to do a closing to get the deal and then get out of that hard money.
Well, then when we're dealing with the FHA, it depends on what policies the FHA has at that time, which fluctuates.
Seasoning and all that crap.
Yeah. Many times they might be in a situation where they're like, oh, you're not a first-time home buyer, and they won't even touch you anyway because you're going to have owned the home. Right?
So you wouldn't even be a first-time home buyer anymore, John, after you bought that?
I'm not saying you can or cannot. I'm saying depending on their situation.
Gotcha.
Right? So it's just something to consider.
Yeah.
Right? What I would suggest is a lot of times go to the horse's mouth. Go straight over to get your FHA loan and say, hey, if I were to do this and this, is this doable?
Gotcha.
If you get told that it is doable, please ask them to give it to you in writing, right? Because you don't want to go back after you did the whole thing and they say, sorry, oh, I was mistaken.
So
no, I didn't say that. Oh, I actually said this, not that. Get something in writing so at least you have that. Or maybe after you get it in writing, get someone else, go on a different day, ask somebody else, see if they're going to match, to get two people to tell you the same thing. You don't want to make these silly type of mistakes. And technically, it wouldn't be your mistake. It'd be their mistake, but you need to protect yourself.
And then they're stuck with that hard money, John. That would be a bad hair day.
Yeah.
Bad hair day. House of Divine Truth. Although, thank you for joining us in Virginia. Although it is not required, should the seller hire an attorney, John?
Okay. My quick answer always is yes, right? And I have had clients ask for my second set of eyes in situations where they didn't need an attorney. And I could spot things that bothered me that ordinarily they would have overlooked, right? Now, you tell me, Chris, when we're in Virginia, what's the process when you're going to go to purchase? Is there a settlement agent? The title comes and does that directly, right?
Yeah, just a title company. Okay.
So if you want to, especially the first 1 or 2 times that you're purchasing, it may be worth the insurance, because that's really what it is.
I did, yeah.
The extra insurance to have the attorney do it. And think of it on the flip side. The attorneys out there, they exist, so there must be a reason.
Yeah.
Right? So utilize them. But then once you're a little more seasoned, so for example, I have clients who I know who are in Florida, and they're buying left and right, and sometimes they'll call me and I'll straight out say, you don't need me. You got this. You know what it is? It's straightforward. Maybe I'll look at the contract early on just to see if there's some additional language. So for example, if you're going to be dealing with a title company and you're in Virginia and you want to get creative, then yeah, get an attorney on your side to help you get creative on the deal. Because the title company is not going to do that.
Oh, no, they're not going to. No way. But I'm just rewinding, John. I remember my first one in 2004. My owner, I had an attorney. He went over the contract with me. He kind of explained it. And I've never to this day had a title company go over anything in the contract. Nothing.
Yeah. So the quick answer is yes.
Nee Huff. Hey, Nee. John, can you recommend a good time to refinance? I don't know. That'd be a good one.
Yeah, when the rates are low.
Depending on what they...
Generally speaking, what I suggest is afterwards, I have a whole section in my book just on the refinance where I touch upon this. So it'll break you down as to how to time it out. Okay? And
right.
So you'll have that. You're more than welcome to that. Now, you want to generally hold that property for about a year, right? And the reason why is there's multiple reasons. One of the reasons that you may have certain penalties if you try to refinance before that 1 year. So you have to look at your loan documents to make sure you're not going to get penalized, right? A second thing is you got to balance your closing costs. So for example, sometimes people will say, well, I had a 3% interest loan, and now it's 2.89. Should I refinance? And the quick answer is probably no, because if you did the math, it doesn't make sense. But if you had a 3% loan and now the rate dropped to 2%, so that's 1 point. 1 point's major, right? In the scheme of things, especially if it's a 30-year loan, it's major. You might be able to refinance that loan, not just lower your monthly payments, but also minimize the years. So you might be able to put yourself in a situation where you end up with a 15-year loan at the same amount you were paying on a 30-year loan. Generally speaking, 15-year loans are going to be at a different rate and a different interest rate than on a 30-year loan. Okay. Now, the next thing to consider is, from a practical point of view, is you got to make sure you have that money each and every month, right? Because it's not just once or twice. You got to make sure every month for the remainder of that loan that you have that money. Okay. Yeah. And that's another thing to take into consider. I hope that answers your question.
My thing is this, John, we're living somewhere. Why not own it? So everybody has a different philosophy, though.
Yeah, well, we are going to own it. But for example, when you're going to refinance, and I touched upon one issue, by the way. I touched upon the issue of refinancing as to lower the percentage.
That's one.
What the question didn't ask is, or rather I should have asked, is why do you want to refinance?
Yeah.
Let's say
you money out
because you want to pull the equity out to buy another property. Then the answer is yes. No doubt about it. It doesn't matter what the price is. It means I need that money. I need to buy something else. Charge me what you got to charge me.
Nice. Jay Bio, that's an excellent question. What criteria do I look for in selecting a real estate attorney, John?
Okay. First and foremost is you want to look and get an attorney who's experienced. And so what does experience mean? It means you want to find someone who's been practicing for a certain number of years. So I may have knew what I was doing while I was doing this for 3 years, but I think I was a little better when I got to 6 years, and I think I was a little better at 8, and now I'm over 20 years. So I'm sharper than I was then. I've seen more. So for example, my internal contracts every single year are getting revised and revised and revised. Okay, so try to figure out how I can make it better and better and better. I can anticipate a problem before it happens. The other aspect is when you're interviewing an attorney, ask them, right? How many real estate deals do you do a year, right? See if they're open to telling you that. Also, when you're asking them how many real estate deals do they do a year, ask them, do you primarily deal with residential properties or commercial properties? Also ask them, do they only do transactional work or do they also do other things? So for example, you have what we can call a door lawyer, right? And a door lawyer is a lawyer who just takes in anything that walks off the street. And they generally may not have the same experience. And I've been through that. And I've been through where when I was first starting out, I took what came in, right? And I wasn't always the best at everything. I can't be. I mean, that's just the facts of life. But over time, I've been able to niche in and emphasize my practice and really fine tune and sharpen, my tools.
Nice. Good answer, bro. Good question, rather, Jay By, because a lot of people are looking for how the hell do they pick out the right one? I mean, so many to choose from, John.
And another thing that I didn't touch upon earlier, and one of the things that I say to clients oftentimes is, do you like the guy or the girl, right? Do you feel comfortable with them? If you're not going to feel comfortable with them to really jive, so to speak, and gel together, then walk away. You have to like the individual. I actually did a video on my Grow with a Lawyer channel on how to determine an expert. And one of the things we talk about there is you have to feel comfortable. Years ago, I had a CPA who I fired, not because they weren't good. I just didn't like them, right? And it took me a couple of years before I was able to find someone else.
Wow.
So if you're not comfortable with this professional, because you got to think of it that you're going to be working with them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't like them, you're not going to be at your best.
Gotcha. Nee Huff, current interest rate. Oh, that was just a statement there. Paul J, hey, what in New York, if I put a water heater and a heat pump on the apartment and put in the lease that the tenant is responsible for the bill, can they do that? I guess they're asking if they can do that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, I could say you could do anything you want and just write it down. So the next level of the question is, will that hold up in court? And so now we're dealing a little bit more on the landlord-tenant side, not
Gotcha.
the purchase side. So as far as a water heater and a water pump, generally speaking, the landlord would be responsible. The landlord is responsible to provide heat and hot water. So then the question is, well, if you provided the whole system separate as to that tenant, then who's responsible for the damages? We'd have to look into the case law to see how that would come down the pike.
Yeah, we put a lot of stuff in our leases, but will it hold up? What is the judge going to say? I think no one can predict that. Oh,
So I'll give you an example on that. Is almost every lease we do is going to have a provision in there that we can enforce and utilize self-help. I can just walk in there and do what I want if I want to. Even though that standard language that's been there forever, and I see it in everybody's contracts or leases rather, it won't hold up, right? Self-help is not allowed, okay?
Gotcha.
Even though it's not allowed, I'll still keep it in my lease.
Good. Be moody. If you can't find a private money lender, is it a good move to get an FHA loan to secure the deal, then refinance it if you have equity?
Well, it depends on why you'd want to even get out of the FHA loan. Generally speaking, the FHA loan might give you solid terms and you don't need to get out of it. Now, if you want to get out for a particular reason, again, it depends what's your purpose, right? And that's something to take into consideration.
Thanks, John. Hold on here. Well, look, Thoyo said they have been a subscriber to your channel for months, John. I'm telling you, John's the man.
Thank you. Thank you for your support. Hope you're liking the content.
And you're smooth too, man. I mean, a lot of attorneys are just, they come out, the data it comes out like I'm listening to a computer talk. Well, you smooth, brother. Let's see. Smooth, the final question. Can he rent to Section 8? I just finished the first-time home buyer program, and he wants to get a house to rent to Section 8.
I think the question is reading. Let's assume that somebody owns a home, and after they own the home, they want to know if they can get a tenant, first off, and then they want to know if that tenant can be someone who is receiving Section 8. I don't see why not.
Yeah, I don't either.
Although I'd have to have some documentation in front of me to put any type of restriction, but generally speaking, no, that's the very nature. If you're the owner of the home, you can rent to whoever you want to, provided you're not discriminating and you're following the law. And Section 8, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to. There's people who enjoy Section 8 tenants. There's others who don't enjoy Section 8. There's pros and cons.
Yeah, I do. I got a bunch of them. I've had them over the years.
Yeah. Good
and bad. I don't think Section 8, matter of fact, I know inherently Section 8 is not all bad, as some people may think. And yeah, I've met some wonderful people, John. As a matter of fact, there are some world-class people that have to have some type of assistance.
Correct.
John, thank you so much. John Kokolakis, hanging out with a real estate attorney in New York. Make sure you download his book, Roundup Family, and the link in the video description below. It will be up for free for the next 2 days only. And John,
find it on Amazon.
Go ahead. What did you say, John?
After the 2 days, if you still want it and you didn't hustle and get it in time, you can jump on Amazon and you can find it there.
Nice. John, final thoughts for my Roundup'ers that are looking to become first-time home buyers, John.
Do your homework. Put in the time. Sweat equity. Go out there, figure out what you want. I'm a big proponent on the first time is don't just buy a single family home. Now, of course, it depends on where you are, but the rationale I have is you want to build your wealth, okay? And so the American dream of owning a home, I'm not sure I believe in that particular dream. I would add the caveat of own your home, but have it bring you some income. And so that's balanced against someone else who says, well, I want to have that one family lifestyle, right? And I'm like, okay, so you don't have to get it all at once. Buy a home, let's say, for example, a 2-family, and I'm not saying 3, 4, or 5 family, get a 2-family. There's many 2-family homes that are wonderful homes. Mm-hmm. Get yourself a good tenant and be there for a couple of years and then buy the second home. Nice. Utilize the first home to get you the second home. If you want, let that second home be a single family home. Now you have 2 tenants paying you an income to help you pay for that next property, right? Now, of course, when the time comes to buy that second one-family home, you might have, fallen in love with this extra capital you have coming in, and you might decide to buy another two-family or another two-family because you got the bug, right? But think about it this way, especially if you just bought and you're single or you're married. And a lot of times they're like, well, I want to make sure about the schools and this and that. They don't matter. You have a baby. The baby was just born. That means you got a number of years before that child is going to enter the school system. So you have 2 years or 3 years to get this build up, save some money, and then have the second property, right? And this is how it goes in conjunction with what Chris teaches on a daily basis as far as building your wealth, increasing your real estate knowledge, and put a couple of properties under your belt.
Are you saying, John, that the first house that they buy does not have to be the house that they own for the rest of their lives, perhaps?
I am definitely saying that. And if anything, I would say it shouldn't be. And the reason why it shouldn't be is even if you love the house, and this goes across the line of just a little philosophy of life, is you always want to be growing. You always want to be going out of your comfort zone. So no matter how much you love the house, you're going to want to upgrade and get another house. You want to go to the next level and the next level and the next level. Because if you don't, then it's almost going to get to the point of why are you doing what you're doing, right? And so you need to break that. But if you're doing that and growing, but at the same time, you're increasing your wealth, that's a win-win, right? And at the end of the day, it's about creating win-win situations.
Well, John, I think a lot of us think, even me, I'm like, I'm looking for that perfect fit. I'm looking for the one house that is going to be in the perfect location and it's going to face the sun rising this way and then the street's nice. And I'm looking for the perfect color. Do some of us get caught up in that, John? And sometimes then we don't even get anything?
Yeah, it's, kind of along the lines of paralysis analysis, right? In that if we start to overanalyze, and like you said, then we end up with nothing. Because what's going to happen is we then slowly become our own worst enemy. And it's almost kind of along the lines, and I do this, and I have this analogy, and certain people have that vision and others don't. And I try to explain is don't look at what it is, look at how it can be.
Wow.
Right? And so that is key. And it comes down to a very simple aspect when you can put two identical vehicles next to each other. Brand new cars. One of them is filthy and muddy, and the other one is waxed and sparkling clean. And you'll go to many people and say, which one's the nicer car? And they'll point to the clean one. They're identical guys, just wash it, right? It's the same thing with the house. And you'll find this all the time when they talk about the paint colors. It's irrelevant, right? As long as we're not dealing with structural issues or location. Because even when it comes to business, the same thing with the house, location, 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 right? First house I lived in was not an ideal location, but it's what I was able to afford. It's where I was able to live, but I understood I did that on my stepping stones to the next one.
I love it. I love it.
And that's basically it.
Yeah, John, I'm going to let you go. I gotta ask you. I see just, I coach people around the country, and I'm like, I think my inner circle members are nervous about making a mistake, John. What would you say for my Roundup families that are just so scared of making a mistake? Because this is a large purchase. The mistake that they may make, is it going to, let me ask you, what would you say to the person that's just so scared about, because you're an attorney. I mean, you're like the mistake guy that cleans up mistake. I mean, this is what you do.
Yeah.
What can you give them?
That's one of the hard parts of our job, is that people come to us with their problems, and many times they'll leave my office with an extra, air in their step. And I'm the one who's now bogged down trying to figure out their screw up, right? It's the unfortunate part. And a lot of times they don't realize that it can be very stressful. But what I will say directly to your point is don't fear fear.
Don't fear.
Done. Right? It's okay to make mistakes. Now, going along the question asked earlier is whether I should get an attorney in Virginia if it doesn't require an attorney. Yes, because then you won't have to worry about the mistakes.
Yeah.
Right? And so then, of course, Chris, it comes up to how large a mistake or how small a mistake. right?
Mitigation, yeah.
Yeah. And so where we are, but if you don't make a move,
Yeah.
you're not going to have mistake, but what you will have is regret. And that weight of regret as the years go on, it's painful.
Tough, yeah.
Right? So it's better to move forward today, make the mistake, just don't make it twice, right? Make it once, jot it down, make a mental note. You're not going to do it again. Live and learn, take it to the next level.
I love it. Yeah, I'm still making mistakes every day, Roundup. I've been doing this since 2004.
Yeah.
My Roundup family, make sure you subscribe to my channel. John Kokolakis, real estate attorney in New York. How do people, his book is below. Make sure you download his book in the video description. Like my content, share. How do people get in touch with you, John, if they want to give you some money or they want you to look at a contract or what have you?
Okay. First and foremost, you're more than welcome to go to my, just type in Grow with a Lawyer on YouTube, right? And I should come up. And I'd love it if you subscribe and show me some support. It's a relatively new channel, okay? And I'm slowly putting some content in there. I actually have planned some additional content just on real estate. Right now I'm talking about business transactions. As far as, you're more than welcome to call my office, 718-444-1000. Okay. Now, just to be clear, I can give some general information, or if you want to chat, fine. But I will only represent you if you're in the state of New York. Okay. I will not be giving any advice, legal advice outside the state of New York. What we discussed here is general information, general knowledge. Now, even though the laws may be different, the general aspects are the same, right? Put us into the ballpark, put us where we need to be, and then go on your own. So I have no problem. If I can't help you, I'll find somebody that can help you, will lead you in the right direction, and get you one step closer to getting yourself a new property.
Nice. John, I just want to thank you because I've dealt with a lot of attorneys. You know, my friend Jessica Siegel, I deal with her. And then with you, you call back, you communicate. I mean, how many times have I given an attorney and I don't even hear from them again? I mean, I know people that have done that too. You've never heard of that though, right, John?
No, of course not. No. Listen, let's be real. There's times where you're going to call back right away, and there's times where it takes a little time. You know, we try to have a 24-hour turnaround policy at the office, but our internal aim is to return every phone call within 2 hours.
Oh, man.
You have to be realistic in that right now, at this very moment that you and I are chatting and your audience is getting to listen to us, I'm not on the phone, right? So clients have to also understand to respect our time when we're otherwise obligated doing things. We have responsibilities as well, or if I'm in court or if I'm at a closing. But that does not mean that their call should not be returned. It does not mean that that line of communication should always be there. So if I'm not able to return a telephone call, either one of my associates will return their telephone call, or our client service director will return a call and letting them know, hey, John's not currently available. We got your call. He'll be giving you a call, and we try to set up an appointment when we can get on the phone. So we're trying to juggle everything.
Nice.
So your point is, yes, unfortunately, and this is more what we call the older school attorneys, is they don't return the phone call. And it's not just attorneys, it's various professionals. It's actually one of the #1 complaints with attorneys is not returning phone calls, right? Yeah. But we try to do our best.
You did. Well, I guess my point is, John, I'm telling you, bro, I've dealt with a lot of attorneys, and that's why you're here. This is exactly why you're on my channel, because I don't think you hit that mold. John, thank you so much. Roundup family.
It was a pleasure.
Download John's book. Get in touch with him. You already know how to do that. John, I'll see you soon. Thank you, my friend.
And my website is kokolakislaw.com. KOKOLAKISLAW.com. You get a little more information about me and what we do.
Okay. Round up. I'll see you soon. Peace.
Bye.